Hello, I'm Wendy. Today we're looking at watercolour foregrounds. It's a demonstration of daisies on the estuary. The estuary that we're looking at is the Nevern estuary in Pembrokeshire, near Newport. It's a lovely spot, and I'll give you a link in the description box if you want to find out a little bit more about it if you don't know it. I know the horizon's on a wonk here. This is because I was taking some photographs across the estuary, but I really loved these daisies that were growing. I think it was about this time of year, maybe a little earlier, and the sort of Michaelmas daisy type flowers are out. And as I said, they really caught my attention. I loved the colours, and I loved all the messiness and busyness of the foreground because I do like painting that sort of thing. So I must have crouched down with my camera to take this photograph of the quite a wide angle view, incorporating the headland at the back, a bit of the estuary, and some of the other flowers and foliage that was there. I did some cropping of the photograph, and I decided to have a go at painting from this one. If you follow my channel, then you'll know that I do paint in quite a loose, hopefully fairly experimental sort of way, which is the way my work is going forwards. So it's not going to be a very detailed picture. I'm just hoping to get the impression of the distant headland, a little bit of the sea, and concentrating more on the foreground with the daisies and trying to get this very cluttered effect with all these dry grasses lying around. I did have more than a bit of trouble painting the sea. And at one stage on the painting, I thought it was going to be one of those for the bin. I really, really messed up the sea. But I think I brought it back. And if you're interested in seeing how I did that, then do stay around and you'll see how, even though people say you can't rescue watercolours, you can. You can do something. And as long as you're not too fussy and precious about it, you can lift out and do all sorts of things with watercolour to try and remedy what might be called mistakes. I do have a video on lifting out and altering watercolour on my channel, so I will give you a link to that. You might find it interesting. This is the drawing that I started out with. It's quite a loose sketch, and you can see that the daisies in the foreground, I've used some masking fluid to mask them out. You really do need to do this, I think, if you're going to do these cluttered foregrounds, because you can't paint all the foliage and everything that's going on behind light coloured flowers. I also used a rigger brush and put some masking fluid on, some very, very fine lines to stand for some of the reeds that were lying on the ground there. And I also did a little bit of masking out just in front of the headland, just a few shapes to suggest a few buildings and maybe the masts of ships in the distance there. I'm working on a Saunders Waterford pad. That is, I'm just having a look now, 12 inches by 9 inches. It's £140 weight with a knot surface, and that's the paper that I usually work on. Colours that I'm using, they're quite basic. I'm using ultramarine. In place as ultramarine with a little light red, just to give a sort of purpley colour, particularly on the distant headland there. The foreground greens I'm using, again, ultramarine mixed with some raw sienna. The very darker greens will have some Prussian in them. Prussian and burnt sienna will give you a very dark green. I think that was about the only colours that I used, apart from I did find a turquoise in my palette, which was quite nice, which I put on the sea area. And for the flowers, I mixed a very light purpley colour, so you would use a blue with more of a brighter red than a light red, or you could use a tube purple and just adjust it so that you can sort of match or try to match those lovely purpley mauves that were in the daisies. I'm making this video as a painting demonstration. It's not a step-by-step tutorial, but I will be giving you some information as I paint along, and there will be some music, and I will speed up a few areas of the video as well. I started off the painting by getting rid of most of the white of the paper I don't like to leave white of the paper showing because I don't think you can judge tones and colours against large areas of white paper. So I tend to look at the lightest colours I can see and get those down on the paper. The sky I would put on and leave because it was very, very light. I put on the sky there, brought it over the hills a little bit, did the sea, first coat of the sea and the first coat of the foreground area. So here we have 30 seconds of me totally messing up the sea. I put it on far too dark, tried to lift it out and made a total mess. So for the next part of the video we're going to ignore the sea and I shall carry on, and then later on I'll show you how even with watercolour you can remedy some of these things that you think are mistakes or that you don't like. So I wasn't happy at all with the sea, but I carried on. I did think about discarding the painting at this point, but I didn't think about that for very long. I usually plough on and try and change things that I don't like. I put a very light colour on the headland and then I started work on this foreground. It's a little bit difficult to see, but apart from masking the flowers, I did mask out some of the grasses with very thin lines on the foreground area as well. Now the brush that I'm using here is a brush I don't use very often. It's a sort of, it's got a sort of serrated edge to it. I'll see if I can find out what it is and put it on the screen, but the writing on my brush is sort of worn off. Not that I've used it that much, it's just that it's been left in the water, and you know how this paintwork on the brushes can come off sometimes. You could use some sort of maybe a hog's hair brush for this, just to get this texture. You could use dry brush work as well. This is the first layer that I was putting on, and I will build up on this work later on in the painting. I like to work around a painting rather than finishing off areas. And because I didn't like the sea very much, I'm probably working the grasses a little bit higher than I would have done if I'd got a nicer wash down for the sea. I'm changing the picture as I go along, sort of responding to the marks that I've already put down and what the watercolour's doing. And I think people are a bit loath to do that. They tend to have a plan in their head of what the picture's going to look like, and if they don't get that, then they think they've failed. But it's much better to be a little bit more open and free in your thinking when you're painting and be prepared change things, I think, and it's a more relaxing way of working as well. So I returned to these foreground grasses again, this time with a much darker green, sort of building on those first washes that I put on there, trying to keep the texture of the grasses. Again, you could you could experiment with brushes to see how you could do this. You want all the grasses sort of separated rather than being blocked in. So this brush, as I said, is doing the job. Perhaps a fan brush, but the fan brushes tend to make things a little bit too sort of regular and all the strokes look the same. Perhaps a hogshead brush would do the job as well, but certainly dry brush, using the brush on its side, hitting and missing the paper. So you're putting these strokes on and you're leaving quite a lot of the first washes underneath showing, so you're getting a difference in tones there and colours. I did use a rigger brush as well, so the initial slightly broader strokes, and then using a rigger brush really quickly you can get these finer grasses in the foreground there. When I'd finished with these brush strokes, getting this sort of effect, then I changed to a round brush and put some different shapes in there, probably suggesting more of the leaves that were around rather than the grasses. So it was back to tackling the sea area, and I'd covered quite a bit of it up, thank goodness. But I did see a sort of turquoisey green colour in the sea, and I used the Cotman turquoise for this and put that on, and I rather liked that actually. I thought it sort of brightened up the painting, and I was quite pleased with that colour. I continued to work on the background. This little peninsula here on the front was a bit darker. I didn't want to bring it too far forward though. So the idea of this painting was to really try and get the recession going. So the headland, I wanted to try and push it back. So I wanted to try and be careful about that. And I put a little bit more detail with the cooler greens and sort of very mauvey purpley greens on the larger distant headland there. When everything was totally dry, then I rubbed off the masking fluid, and I also at this stage put a mount around the picture, as you will see here, I like to do this to sort of concentrate now more on the composition and to fine tune the composition. And also now I'm having a look at it, I did a little bit of extra work there on the headland, just in front of it. I was looking at the reference, all the time as well, just to give me some ideas and show me a way forward for this. And I'd left those little white buildings and things, and I just put a little bit of shadow on those because I didn't want them to be too prominent. This next little bit of the video I have speeded up by about ×2, I think, using the rigger to put more grasses on there, just to sort of feel my way into making them a little bit more interesting. You can see I'd dotted around a little bit of masking fluid as well. There were some grasses there that had these little sort of light white flowers on them, and so I sort of picked those out, which again broke up the sea as well and hid a little bit more of the sea, which was quite nice. In actual fact, I think it worked out all right in the end, so this is a lesson for all of us. Don't give up too soon on a picture, and don't have too much of an idea, of a preconceived idea of what you want to achieve, because you very rarely achieve that anyway. So it's best to be a little bit more fluid in your thinking when you're painting, I think, and be prepared to see where the picture's taking you. I used a few more spots of the white gouache just to break up that area of the reeds. I felt they were looking a little bit dull. You could always, of course, paint the daisies and everything with the white gouache, but it turns it more into a mixed media painting then, rather than a watercolour painting. And the masking fluid just reserves the white of the paper for you, so that when it comes to painting the daisies, you could have them nice and fresh. I knocked back the white of the lines that I'd left in the foreground with a little bit of burnt sienna, and then I went on to tackle the daisies, which turned out to be the easiest part of the painting, using the yellow with a touch of orange for the centres, and then, as I said at the beginning of the video, mixing a very dilute mauvey purpley colour to match the colours of the daisies, and varying it a little bit. Don't have them all exactly the same, because some of them would have been in shadow. So now again with the mount around it, I was sort of fine-tuning the composition a little bit. I mixed up a very dark green with using the Prussian blue and the burnt sienna to put the stems of the daisies in. I also did an extra little bit of texture work by maybe putting some thin lines with the reeds and also doing a little bit of dotting around to suggest the leaves. I think it helps to bring some of this foreground just in one or two places up into the part of the picture that's further away, the distant headland, just to sort of join the two together. This was my finished painting then, and I was really quite pleased with it. I think for me it captured something about the area and how it felt being there, and all the lovely daisies and all the clutter and everything that was going on the estuary there. So as I said, I was quite pleased with it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you gained some tips and some ideas that you could use in your own paintings. Bye for now, and if you enjoy my channel then do subscribe and you won't miss what's coming up next.